Picture this. You're flipping through an ancient medieval manuscript expecting to find prayers, rules of conduct, or maybe a theological treaty. But suddenly, you stumble upon detailed beer recipes, lists of herbs with intense psychoactive effects, and vivid descriptions of mystical visions triggered by fasting, chanting, or herbal concoctions. Sounds like fiction? Not even close. This was the real life inside many medieval monasteries, and today we're pulling back the curtain on this hidden world, where monks weren't just praying in silence but brewing strong beer, experimenting with mind-altering plants and pushing their bodies and minds to the edge of transcendence. In this video, you'll discover the strange, intoxicating, and sometimes downright trippy rituals of monastic life that most history books politely skip. Because, as it turns out, some of the holiest men of the Middle Ages were also the most elevated, and not always in the spiritual sense. During the Middle Ages, monasteries weren't just sanctuaries of prayer. They were also hubs of productivity, learning, and, believe it or not, pleasure. And it all started with beer. Forget the idea of monks living off stale bread and water. The truth is, medieval water sources were often so contaminated that drinking it was a health hazard. Beer, on the other hand, was boiled, fermented, and much safer to consume. What began as a survival tactic soon became an art form. Monasteries, especially in what is now Belgium and Germany, began developing sophisticated brewing techniques. They infused their ales with herbs and spices, created fermentation systems, and unknowingly invented what we now call craft beer. But we're not talking about mild beverages. Some of these brews had alcohol levels that would put modern stouts to shame, and monks weren't shy about consuming them. In fact, many monasteries allocated up to 5 liters of beer per monk per day, divided across meals. And if anyone questioned this, it was all explained as liquid bread or nutrition. Historical records even joke about monks who stumbled during vespers or got too enthusiastic during chants, all thanks to divine fermentation. But drinking was just the tip of the altar. Behind the cloister walls, monks cultivated elaborate herb gardens filled with more than just rosemary and thyme. These gardens were medicinal, officially. But some of the plants they grew had properties that went far beyond healing a cough. Take belladonna, for instance. In small doses, it soothed pain. In higher doses, it caused vivid hallucinations. Henbane could produce sedative effects so powerful that it was banned in many regions. Mugwort, wormwood, and even datura were used to cleanse the spirit or induce visions. And yes, these herbs were often administered under the guise of spiritual guidance. The logic was simple. If the body was sick, you healed it. If the soul was in turmoil, perhaps a divine vision would help. Some monks would ingest a carefully measured potion before prayer and report encounters with angels, heavenly lights, or voices from above. Today we might call it a bad trip. Back then, it was just a sign that God was very, very close. And here's the twist. They didn't always need physical substances to get spiritually lifted. The monastic lifestyle itself often triggered altered states of consciousness. Imagine this routine: days of fasting, broken sleep, hours of repetitive chanting, long nights of silence, and the ever-present smell of thick incense. It was sensory deprivation on one end and overstimulation on the other. That combo does something to your brain. Many monks described floating sensations, brilliant flashes of light, and spiritual ecstasy, all without ingesting anything. From a modern psychological perspective, we'd say they were dissociating, or experiencing the neurological effects of extreme physical and mental discipline. But for them, it was evidence of holiness. In fact, the more intense the vision, the more respected the monk. The suffering was the path. And if that path just happened to include some herbal help along the way, well, that was just another tool in God's pharmacy. But this is where things get even murkier, because when you really look at it, the line between sacred devotion and indulgent escapism becomes almost invisible. In countless medieval texts, monks justified their use of alcohol and herbs as part of liturgical life. Drinking? It's part of the feast. Strong herbs? It's part of healing the spirit. In fact, the idea was that if something brought you closer to God, or calmed the sins of the flesh, then it was spiritually valid. But what if these visions weren't divine revelations, just chemical reactions? What if the ecstasy wasn't salvation, just intoxication? Of course, that question was never truly asked back then, because what mattered was the result: transcendence. Whether through prayer, potions, or pain, the goal was to go beyond the limits of the body. And if the path to heaven included a buzz, so be it. And honestly, isn't that kind of relatable? We like to imagine we're more enlightened now, more advanced, but really we're still chasing the same thing. Whether it's meditation retreats, digital detoxes, guided therapy, or a cold beer after work, the desire is the same: to escape, to expand, to feel something more. The monks weren't relics of a strange past. They were humans, just like us, trying to make sense of a confusing world with the tools they had. Their rituals may have involved incense and Latin chants, but at the core, they were searching for meaning. They were exhausted, curious, overwhelmed, and faithful. And they were willing to go pretty far, sometimes too far, to touch something beyond the mundane. So next time you picture a medieval monastery, don't just imagine silence and candles. Picture barrels of beer aging in the basement. Imagine secret herb gardens blooming with mind-bending plants. Think of hooded figures swaying in the dark, whispering prayers with dilated pupils and visions of angels dancing in the rafters. Because behind the vow of silence, behind the walls of devotion, there were experiments of the body and soul that still echo in how we live today. If this video opened your eyes to a part of history you never saw before, hit that like button, subscribe for more bizarre truths from the past, and drop a comment. Which monastic vice surprised you the most? And hey, maybe the next time you sip a strong ale or light a scented candle, say a little prayer. You're following a very, very old tradition,